coordinate ahead of time, you may see some items repeated, but of course repetition is at the core of learning and memory. So I actually had a hand in developing the agenda for this open session and gave myself an absolutely ridiculous charge for a 10-minute talk. And it's not, so it's technically public engagement strategies, experiences, and assessments, which would keep us here for a year. It's not really a field in which I have expert publication credentials, so I started to review the literature. And do I need slides?
May, is your mic on?
Is this better? Yes? No? Yes? Or I can hold it.
Oh, that's perfect.
That was perfect. And which is forward?
Not anymore.
Right side.
Right. You know what? I'm just going to hold it. For communication skills. Right side.
Okay.
Where am I pointing? Isn't that the right side?
But you have to put it on the slideshow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so it's not me. Okay. That's good. Okay. So I thought I'd review the literature and came to the shocking realization that I was about to address a group that had half of whom had written this literature. So I, again, preaching to the choir, as it were. So this academic study of science communication seems to be at an all-time high, at least according to the Web of Science. Since the early part of the 20th century, over almost 1,000 papers have been published on the subject of science communication. And you can see about where the field really took off was in the wake of the Sputnik era realization that U.S. science competitiveness was at stake. So the realization that U.S. investments in science had to increase was followed closely by the realization that science needed to be communicated. So this is the era, 1963, Science magazine published an article on science communication, beginning it by saying that many scientists prefer not to be concerned with the added problem of communicating scientific facts and opinions to the public, but like it or not, this is a responsibility. Scientific enterprise will continue to be featured in the mass media to some degree, so communication is essential for science competitiveness. This was the National Science Foundation really kicked off this effort. AAAS was also involved, and in 1966, the National Academy of Sciences authorized the study. The National Research Council authorized, as far as I can tell, the first NAS study on science communication. You can see the title of the study, Scientific and Technical Communication, a Pressing National Problem and Recommendations for its Solution. So this was a 3-year study that was funded by the National Science Foundation, this issued, the study issued certain recommendations, and in retrospect, they're interesting to review. So here we are, 44 years later, and it is still a pressing problem. And one of the conclusions of that 1969 study is strong science and technology is a national necessity. Adequate communication is a prerequisite for strong science and technology. And I think that is a statement that did underlie much of our discussion this morning. So sort of two questions emerge at this point in our discussion. Two questions in the public interfaces of life science. Who is the public and with whom are they interfacing? So who is the public? As we heard this morning, there are many different publics and there are many different models of communication between experts and the public. And this is part of the science communication literature. We've heard a lot already about top-down, where there's a public that lacks information and is just told directly. There are more engaged publics. So there's passive and active publics. So passive publics that have deficits that can be remedied by one-way communication, dialogue that involve negotiation and iterative connections, and finally participatory publics that want to contribute to production of knowledge, multi-directional knowledge. So the other key question in public interfaces of life science, with whom are they interfacing? Well, There are all kinds of interfaces that are relevant to our discussions today and tomorrow. There are the creators of the science. Those are life science, academic life scientists, and other life scientists, including industry scientists. These are perceived differently by the public at times. There are the reporters of the science. These are science journalists whose specific beat is to report on science. There are other journalists because sometimes scientific achievements or scientific phenomena are newsworthy beyond their scientific context. There are consumers, users, exploiters of the science, including government science entities who use science to guide policy, environmental advocacy entities who use science to recruit members of the public to a particular cause. There are corporate science entities who use science to convince the public of the value of products that are manufactured. And there are advertisers who use science to sell things. There are also increasingly peer interpreters of the science or science communicators. And these are the science-friendly 15 to 20% of the population. That's a figure that's remained stable for decades. People who are not scientists themselves but are favorably inclined towards science. But with social media, there are increasing numbers of members of the public who communicate about science. So how does the public regard these interfacers? Well, as Alan referred to earlier, there have been a whole series of surveys about the trustworthiness of information providers or communicators, and the scientific community scores high on trustworthiness with the public in most of these surveys, particularly with respect to other science communicators, such as the press. You have television and the press here, and Congress, other government science entities, and the like. In general, scientists are highly trusted with respect to certain life science issues, but not all. This is a Scientific American Nature online poll published in 2010, where scientists, you can see, are highly trustworthy, highly trusted with certain issues involving life science, particularly evolution and stem cell research, but paradoxically less so with other equally life science-oriented questions involving genetically modified crops, pesticides, depression, drugs, and food pandemics. Now, trust in science is not uniquely American, as evidenced by this 2013 opinion poll conducted by Carbon Reef UK specifically about climate change. And again, scientists score very high on public trust here. Advocacy groups also do. Journalists, intermediate, and again, at the bottom, we have politicians and then social media and bloggers. So with the exception of politically conservative public, which is rendered here symbolically in red, trust in scientists in the U.S. has been fairly stable over the last 3 decades. This is a study by Gauchat, 2012. A 2009 Pew study, however, reveals a peculiar disconnect between trust and belief. And basically, this poll revealed that even though the public trusts scientists, the public doesn't necessarily embrace the information provided by scientists. So this Pew poll shows that the respondents felt that 84% of the public feels that science's effect on society is positive, scientists contribute to societal well-being, but even those members of the public who do not believe in global climate change or climate science deniers, as it were, their assessment of how scientists contribute to the welfare of society is not substantially different from those who do embrace the concept that global change is due to human activity. And same for these other hot button or controversial issues, which is a bit puzzling. And here I like this quotation from Sheila Jackanoff, who's a professor of science, technology, and society at Harvard. Why does it seem easier to get people to trust critical opinion on the quality of a restaurant, film, or novel than to trust the opinions of scientists on a range of policy-relevant issues such as climate change, nuclear safety, genetically modified organisms, or the causes of hunger or gun violence? And I think 2 other axes that we need to focus on in terms of communication of life sciences. Other factors that mediate the impact of the interface are frequency and intensity. And Alan Leshner earlier discussed some of the limitations on science communication. Scientists are fairly loath to dress up like bees and head to Downing Street and in protest of pest control methodology. So I just want to briefly review a case study that I've been involved in and kind of has, I'm sort of a Milton Berle among entomologists. Like whenever Milton Berle, whenever a comedian died, everyone asks Milton Berle to make a statement. Whenever something newsworthy involving insects comes up, I get asked for an opinion. So I got involved in colony collapse disorder early on. So this is a phenomenon that sort of gripped the nation's attention. And it started, this is just the first year, and we're in the 6.5 year right now. An extension report from the Mid-Atlantic Apiculture and Extension Consortium reported on a disturbing phenomenon that had come to the attention of a group of researchers, honeybee researchers, that was brought to their attention by beekeepers. This is the observation, particularly Dave Hackenberg, who's a beekeeper who lost 400 colonies in a very brief period of time in a very disturbing way that he had not seen in a lifetime of beekeeping, and that is probably familiar to most people. The foragers, most oldest, most experienced bees in the hive just disappear, leaving behind plenty of their offspring to brood, plenty of food, leaving their queen, very atypical bee behavior. Other bee pests such as wax moth caterpillars and other species that encroach on bee products seem loath to enter these abandoned hives. So no one knows why this was happening, and it was quite disturbing to the beekeepers. This was monitored by the beekeeping community and bee scientists, who basically, again, another extension publication by February 2007, revealed that this strange phenomenon had manifested itself in over 20 states. At this point, it became a news item, but you notice it was not a science news item, it was a business news item. And the reason it was a news item for business is that in February, half of America's 2.5 million bee colonies get transported to the state of California to pollinate almonds. Almonds, at the time of the $2.5 billion industry, almond growers were concerned that there were not adequate bee colonies to support that almond crop. And it was reported by business, national business correspondents. Here you see Alex Nueva from the New York Times. He's a business journalist. Same thing for these other news outlets. It did not take long for the conspiracy theorist communicators to enter the fray. Here you see that same week that the business news communicators were explaining this phenomenon, so were the conspiracy theorists. This is a site that claims that Putin was, by projecting 250 megahertz electromagnetic signals, was agitating the Russian bees that had been imported into the U.S. 10 years before, and that this 250 megahertz signal was agitating the U.S. public as a result of exposure by the U.S. government to gin up enthusiasm for the Iraqi war. Very complicated, but you notice it almost coincided. Parody news sites, very close on the heels. By March 6th, like 2 weeks after the initial reports, Stephen Colbert recommended investing in bees. The fewer there are, the more they're worth. And he then went on and called his broker. The extensive lawsuit caught attention of legislators in key states. California was a $2.5 billion almond industry, and Florida, where bees overwintered. And the House Ag Subcommittee on Horticulture and Organic Agriculture, which has oversight over apiculture, held a hearing on colony collapse disorder. And at this hearing was another opportunity for communication. 3 people represented the scientific community, government, and 2 academic researchers. And then 4 represented the beekeeping and the almond industry. I guess Farm Bureau is kind of an NGO. So this hearing presented an opportunity for all kinds of scientific communication. Academic life sciences, government science entities, NGO advocacy groups, and corporate science entities. This was picked up by all kinds of national media, and shortly thereafter followed by environmental advocacy sites here with an open letter published by Sierra Club to Senator Harkin, claiming that scientists attributed colony collapse disorder to genetically modified crops, which came as a big surprise to me because I had just chaired an 18-month study, National Research Council study, reviewing 3,000 publications on pollination and the status of pollinators, the study on the state of pollinators in North America, and there were no such data. So yet all of these citations that were provided in this open letter antedated the appearance of CCD. So again, the environmental advocacy groups were not constrained by actual science facts. In fact, many of these reports engineered or invented a quotation from a long-dead scientist to justify their concerns. Einstein never did say, according to two biographers who read everything they could find, if the bees disappeared off the surface of the globe, now would have only 4 years of life left. Nobody knows why he would have said it. But if he did say it, it would have had to have been in a seance, since he died 35 years before it appeared in print. Tabloid newspapers created a meme that will not die, that mobile phones kill bees. There's actually a study, unrefereed study, posted on the web, done by 2 German physicists about cordless phones, not mobile phones, cordless phones. They put the handset in the hive, nothing to do with mobile phones, yet this meme continues. It's a very embraceable story. David talked about storytelling. This is something people grasp. It's a part of technology they love to hate. No scientific evidence this meme will not die. Then, of course, the completely irresponsible tabloids. And in one case, direct communication with the bees themselves. This is a transcript of a channeling on April 26, 2007. The questioner is asking the bees why they seem to be disappearing. The edited version of the channeling will appear in the next issue of Sedona Journal of Emergence. Published scientific literature. Celebrity media outlets weighed in. So some celebrity communicators, Roseanne Barr, used colony class disorder to reinforce her belief that everything could be attributed to Chernobyl. The House Reese Natural Resource Committee held a second hearing to broaden the concern to other pollinators, which created an interesting controversy among public. So the beekeepers, who are a special case in colony class disorder because they are, to some degree, they are a corporate entity, but they are also, to some degree, a scientific community, were very upset that other bees were brought in, other pollinators were brought in, and were very upset with the individuals chosen to testify on behalf of pollinator science, including me. James Fisher, this was on a blog, what's it called, listserv. James Fisher, it's an interesting community, beekeeping community, has very well-regarded, well-placed academic scientists, as well as people who have a history, a long tradition of expertise. So James Fisher wanders among beehives in the mountains of, he wrote his own biography, Virginia, without any formal credentials in entomology at all, and that's a point of pride for him. Nature, the one way about the earliest communication that scientists had with the public was through a PBS documentary, which was actually conducted interviews with scientists. But in terms of scientific literature, very slow to appear. There was an op-ed piece in Public Library of Science Biology in June in a section called Unsolved Mysteries. So it really was not a scientific paper per se. The first scientific paper did not appear until 9 months after the initial media coverage. So this is the first experimental publication appeared in Science, associating not a cause-effect relationship, but a correlation between a new virus not hitherto reported in the U.S. called Israeli acute paralysis virus and colony class disorder, which got a lot of publicity, and it finally became a science journalism story. So now we have the science reporters reporting on this story 9 months after the initial report, and more conspiracy theorists where I stumbled on this site searching Israeli acute paralysis virus, only to discover it was actually the secret weapon of Mossad, and then the Israeli Secret Service, or secret, in any case, this is a site called Synagogues of Satan, Secret History of Jewish World Domination. Please wonder if somebody's going to audit my internet use and wonder what I'm doing there. More entertainment media. Gil Grissom, CSI entomologist, actually by October undertakes a study of colony class disorders. He finds a beehive at a crime scene This colony is healthy. I needed to study colony collapse disorder. Bees are dying in record numbers everywhere. This is how people are learning about colony collapse disorder. And advertisers weighed in by November 2007, where Burt's Bees launched an educational initiative in conjunction with the release of Jerry Seinfeld's Bee movie. They released a documentary, set up a website. You could get a free packet of seeds to grow bee-friendly flowers and learn more about colony collapse disorder. So again, many, many interfaces. So colony collapse disorder communication continues today, most recently with a joint release of the stakeholders report from a meeting in October, the USDA EPA report recently issued, basically concluding that it's a multifactorial problem, which is a difficult message to convey. And here you see it's picked up by legitimate traditional news outlets, as well as blog sites, op-ed news, and others, but also Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook. It was like #1 on Reddit for a while, which was really kind of neat, with all kinds of people weighing in, peers weighing in. And it sort of also led to questions about what constitutes an authoritative voice. This is a paper from the Social Studies of Science journal, arguing that beekeepers conduct a form of science themselves. It doesn't follow the same rules as does science published in scientific journals, but that they should have a voice in scientific decisions as well, which is something we may choose to discuss sometime in the next day or so. So bee communication is really an apt metaphor for our upcoming discussions. I just put this slide up here not only because of the pun, but because the depiction of the beehive here is actually a picture of a hornet's nest. Beehives do not look like this. So we have a real challenge in communicating with the public as scientists and competing with all the other interfaces.